One of Japan's arsenal cities was selected as the first to feel the weight of atomic power. A scientific thunderbolt gives a preview of its destructive force.
Arguably the most important factor in the outcome of World War II was the invention of the atomic bomb. The drive for a revolutionary new technology during this war put a spotlight on science, specifically the field of particle physics. The future of this field in the U.S. was shaped significantly by particle physicist Robert Wilson as he pursued a utopian vision of a new national laboratory created to explore the mysteries captured in the depths of every atom. Accompanying Wilson's scientific dream was a quest to convince the government and public that the pursuit of scientific knowledge should lie at the core of the American identity. Wilson's legacy endures both in particle physics and in the broader realm of bringing scientific appreciation and understanding to the public at large. In 1941, Italian physicists Enrico Fermi and Albert Einstein informed the U.S. government that the Nazi scientists had split the uranium atom and could create an atomic bomb. The U.S. mission to build the atomic bomb, called the Manhattan Project, was born. Bombs were secretly buried in bunkers in New Mexico until 1945, when the United States dropped 2 bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, effectively ending the Second World War. Although the Nazi threat was gone, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union created new fears and competitive challenges. Scientific funding in the 1960s increased massively, most notably toward the NASA space program, in a race to beat the USSR to the moon.
It is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. The exploration of space will go ahead.
When the U.S. government began to see the importance of science to America's hegemony, Americans came to associate science with bombs, radioactivity, and death. During this time, a young Berkeley grad named Robert Wilson was making his name in the particle physics scene. Robert Rathburn Wilson was born in 1914 in the tiny town of Frontier, Wyoming. After earning his PhD from Berkeley in 1936, Wilson was selected by the architect of the Manhattan Project, J. Robert Oppenheimer, to work in the elite group of scientists at Los Alamos. There he earned a reputation as a pistol-packing cowboy with a passion for particle accelerators. When the war ended, Wilson headed to Cornell University to lead their Department of Nuclear Studies. Wilson came to view the 1960s world of particle physics as a small club, open only to those with the right connections. He hatched a plan to start a new laboratory outside of the university system, open to scientists from all backgrounds, including those from the Soviet Union. In 1968, Wilson brought his plan to Congress with high expectations. He asked for $250 million compared to the $40 billion Congress spent on science that year. Wilson pitched his utopian idea for a new national laboratory.
People in Congress who would approve the funding for this machine valued the potential of physics research. Scientists were appreciated for their contributions during those wars.
After considerable deliberation by the House of Representatives, the Senate, and Lyndon B. Johnson, Wilson was allotted $7.3 million of initial funds, about 30% of his initial request, to create the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory. Wilson searched the country for a location for his lab, in a time when most people vaguely associated radioactivity with uncanny rays that brought hideous death, with weapons great enough to destroy the world. He had to persuade residents that, contrary to popular belief, science and nuclear activity had a purpose beyond war. The goal of Fermilab, Wilson argued, was not to build more devastating weapons, but to help humankind understand the origins of our shared universe. In 1968, Wilson found a willing, although initially reluctant, partner in the small city of Batavia, Illinois, where he created the lab. Following significant budget cuts during construction, Wilson completed the lab 6 years later in 1974. He had also developed a festering anger toward what he perceived to be an ignorant Congress. In 1970, Wilson stood in front of Congress again to request funding for a main ring accelerator, which would be used to smash atoms into their tiniest components. Senator John Pastor asked Wilson if the project would help national security. He responded, "Only from a long-range point of view, of developing technology. Otherwise, it has to do with, are we good painters, good sculptors, great poets? I mean, all the things we really venerate and honor in our country and are patriotic about. In that sense, this new knowledge has all to do with honor in country, but has nothing to do directly with defending our country, except to help make it worth defending."
Russia was doing something, Europe was doing something. The interest was national security to some degree, and Robert Wilson was sort of the first to say, this is for much more.
Wilson's lyrical and artistic perspective on science was well pitched to the public. It came on the heels of the 1969 moon landing, a tangible outcome of scientific funding and a source of national pride. As research in particle physics nudged closer to unlocking the deepest mysteries of subatomic particles, accelerators of higher and higher energy levels were needed. After years of success with smaller accelerators, Wilson had a vision for a 1,000 GeV accelerator he called the Tevatron, one which would allow Fermilab to stay at the energy frontier. The Department of Energy, however, had different goals for its capital, namely defense-related nuclear energy programs. As the DOE cut funding for experiments, Wilson saw his patience end. He resigned as Fermilab's director in 1978. Wilson's partner took over the lab, and the 4.2-mile ring called the Tevatron was constructed and completed in 1983. Using the Tevatron, researchers at Fermilab made the Nobel Prize-winning discovery of the top quark. When the USSR collapsed, everything changed. Congress no longer saw science as essential to national security, and new funding for groundbreaking experiments in particle physics practically slowed to a halt. A laboratory called CERN in Switzerland became, and remains, the leader in particle physics.
When the Cold War ended, basically Congress and the presidents lost interest in particle physics.
Wilson saw it as a truly international laboratory and wanted colleagues from throughout the world to be able to use the facility here.
Robert Wilson died in 2000 and was buried at Pioneer Cemetery at Fermilab, but his scientific legacy endures today. His vision for an international laboratory was not realized at Fermilab or even in the United States, but what wasn't possible in 1968 is now a reality. Scientists from a worldwide community, including from Fermilab, collaborate at CERN. The applications of particle accelerators have grown far beyond their original pure scientific context. Wilson himself is credited with inventing proton beam therapy, a cancer treatment in use today. Of the roughly 26,000 accelerators worldwide, only 1% are research machines with energies above 1 GeV. Accelerators are widely used for both medical treatments and industrial and biomedical research. The scientific device, whose practicality was questioned by members of Congress in the 1960s, has grown to a cutting-edge technological tool.
You look at a lot of electronics designs, the medical imaging, all of those things have come out not because people are trying to invent a mammogram, but because the instrumentation you need here can get taken over to those things.
A public that is ignorant of science and how science is done is not going to support scientific research enthusiastically.
Nobody, cares about science, then that's something that they won't give a high priority to.
Politics still plays a dominant role in the funding of pure scientific research, and scientists still find themselves at odds with public understanding and the perceived common good. Wilson's earnest and impassioned drive to bring science to people of all backgrounds was realized to a great extent at Fermilab, where he implemented early affirmative action hiring practices and courted the support of the local community. His successor as director, Leon Letterman, carried forward Wilson's mission, creating far-reaching educational programs for adults and children alike to explain the importance of science to America. Today, Fermilab brings hundreds of kids and secondary school teachers from the Chicago Public Schools every summer, furthering Wilson's dream of a collaborative and interconnected laboratory to the next century and beyond.